In the beginning came the proto-Mountbattens, royals from the German House of Hesse and the British royal family, who roamed Europe in the days of out-and-official, loud and proud Nepo babies 180 to 200 years ago, when most of the power, money, but also the political authority over the people of Europe moved through royal and aristocratic families as their legally inherited rights. For such a family and power base, young House Mountbatten was unusually female-centric, and one could argue largely female-led until, appropriately enough, Dickie started handling things. Emerging during the Victorian period in Britain and Germany, which has to be close to peak patriarchy, when it seemed like the only relevant question needed in order to assess a fellow aristo would be, who is your father, the Mountbattens owed most of their royal status, most of their connections to power, respectability and wealth from their female line. So dynastic imperative looked a little different for them compared to most of their peer group. And the women of House Mountbatten tended to be smart and determined, big personalities, many with strong beliefs in equality and altruism. They kept turning into action if you didn't keep an eye on them. If you went for a genteel visit to one of the charities they'd founded, you'd find them elbow deep in the bandage bucket, or manning a soup kitchen during a refugee crisis, passing on some socialist philosophy to their kids if they were the younger Victoria, or vocally encouraging some severe oppression of the proletariat if they were Aunt Alex. Poor form there, but they were all doers, you know. Of course, that didn't really count in the system that they lived under. What counted in the dynastic age was what titles and rights you were born with and what titles and rights you married into. Because they were royals in an age where they could still claim to be a better kind of human being through breeding and not get laughed out of the room. In fact, that point would be socially reinforced for them. Their world still believed that commoners generally didn't because commoners generally couldn't. A lot of the female proto-Mountbattens did very well in that system. You'll notice a lot of the girls here started at princess and then married up. The title of Grand Duchess either meant that you were married to a ruler of a sovereign territory, if you were in Germany like Alice, or for her daughter Elizabeth in Russia, it made you a special kind of princess, since there it was a title only carried by the children of a Tsar and the people that they'd married, so a rank above a standard prince. And we've also got a queen, a Tsarina, and an empress in this maternal bloodline. So the maternal descent of the Mountbattens was a long way from objectionable. In fact, it was impressive on the female side. It's the paternal line that's the one that gets everyone sniffy about Mountbatten breeding. Apart from the shenanigans going on in that top left-hand corner there, which, we will get into, princes were pretty numerous in Germany, and there were layers of them. From the Grand Dukes, who ran their own territories, right the way down to princes that in other countries would probably barely make it to being an earl or even a viscount. Some of the men here started on the very lowest rung of being princes. They were illustrious highnesses. However, through some things that really should not have counted in their system, but did increasingly as they got towards the 20th century, personal connections and political ability, they all made it to Serene Highness, and two of them married up very significantly. On the other hand, the paternal line of House Mountbatten were effective and ambitious. So socially dexterous, it often seemed as if they were actual social lubricant for the heroically awkward early Windsor kings. Could be a bit oily, tended slightly dodgy, but they were also capable. And not just for aristocrats. They could have been capable for commoners. They all held down jobs for a kick-off, and those jobs were almost always in the Royal Navy, which is not the easiest gig. From the 1860s to the 1960s, all the young men and one young woman born to House Mountbatten joined the Navy, and everyone pictured here served through a world war. The young Mountbattens joined the Navy so reliably they might have been pleased recipients of this kind of George V desk-side children's career chat. And you might care to brace yourself for a meeting with an accurate portrayal of the worst royal parent of the 20th century. George V, everybody.
You will be a sailor, and that's all there is to it, do you understand? You will be in the Navy. You will spend your whole life in the Navy, and there's a good chance that you will die in the Navy. And I don't want the matter ever raised again.
But in such circumstances, a braced young Mountbatten might pop out from behind the door and say, well, that's just excellent rage parenting and an amazing career demand, Your Majesty. I don't know why young Georgie here isn't going for it, but could an eligible Mountbatten sign up for the Navy twice, sir?
You will be in the Navy!
Good-o! The Mountbattens were the deepest Royal Navy branch of the royal family, doing important and sometimes dangerous work through 2 world wars in a service which both was and was not the pure and impartial workspace that 20th century royals believed and often declared the Royal Navy to be.
People make all kinds of exceptions for members of the royal family.
Not the Navy. They pride themselves on making no exceptions ever.
I mean, yes and no. But we've got a lot of careers ahead to get into that experience. But it certainly didn't hurt the Mountbattens that in royal circles the next deepest Navy branch was the Windsors, and a Navy man would get an automatic base degree of approval from even George V, who was otherwise, would you believe it, not a super approachable monarch, and whose favour they would need as the Mountbattens got a roller coaster of a ride from the early 20th century. Princess Victoria, the mother of future House Mountbatten, leaned left politically. She believed in socialism and in Home Rule for Ireland, which made her the way out there lefty in the royal family of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. She also educated her children with a very progressive curriculum and was described by pretty much everyone that ever knew her as mouthy, including her. The left-wing branch of the royal family that she nurtured would turn out to be quite important to the early Labour movement. As Labour gained office in the 1920s and 30s, the Mountbattens, particularly Dicky, were often their contact at the senior royal court. While the Crown might have been leaking political power at that point, it was still massively influential. By contrast, her sister Alexandra was the first lady of autocracy, as Tsarina of Russia with a Tsar that was a bit of a sub, making her more co-ruler than consort for his later reign. Her marriage in 1894 had lifted the clan out of the middling European royalty league they were in, and the Battenbergs became particularly important, the connection point between autocratic Russia and imperialist Britain, the 2 biggest thrones in a Europe that was still dominated by monarchies. The Battenbergs visited their powerful Russian relations often and travelled widely in the country. Socialist-leaning or not, they were invested heavily in the Tsarist sod the peasants regime. It was just too good an opportunity to miss. While they hated to admit it, money was the lifeblood of aristocratic houses. To any observer in the early 20th century, this was a house whose time had surely come. But Aunt Alex and Uncle Nicholas's autocratic crown had been wobbling, and they finally lost control of it in the Russian Revolution of March 1917. And from there the descent was rapid. Continental support gone, the Battenbergs lost their right to be royalty that same summer, which was a wound that did fester for some of its members. But they did pick up their cool new surname. They became the Mountbattens, and they remained a high-ranked aristocratic house with a flavour of royal left on them. In 1918, the status of the formerly powerful Russian side of the clan went from imprisoned to murdered, violently, en masse and individually. The Mountbattens managed their fall as carefully as they could, but the Russian Revolution was a personal, political and financial catastrophe for them. By 1921, the house money was largely gone. By 1922, They'd sold or given up all their properties except one, which belonged to Georgie, the oldest son, who appears to have got the financial life raft somewhat. There would be nothing for younger son Dickie to inherit. The younger Lord Louis Mountbatten really was Lord of Nowhere at all. His was just a courtesy title, and the Mountbattens were dipping down to become a formally royal part of the court service class, and the Windsors and their court community found themselves very content for the Mountbattens to not rise again. The family had been masters of making connections to power, but by the fall and exile of Prince Andrew of Greece, young Alice's husband, in 1922, they'd had just one royal connection with future potential left alive, and that was just a friendship, and fragile, and depending largely on this, still a century later, somewhat dubious and overly dramatic young man, and the job he managed to score by being just a little bit lacking in the honour department. Dickie was, in many ways, the most ruthless and ego-driven Mountbatten, but to turn his house's plummet into a bounce he would need to be. It would take skills and traits considered both honourable and low, but by hook or by crook, House Mountbatten would rise again. And just 100 years later, a king of House Mountbatten sits upon the throne of Great Britain, even if he doesn't bear the name. Which, despite the fuss two of its male members made about that at the time, is actually, when you get into it, very Mountbatten. We start where I damn well say we start. And I say we start with Princess Alice, the spur of the British royal family that generated the Mountbattens, future independent-minded humanitarian, and recipient of some of her parents' least messed up parenting. So when we return, it will be 1843, and there'll probably be someone draped in Honiton lace in the vicinity.